Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of the Trap League podcast. Uh, just
What up, guys?
we're gonna probably do another episode, probably not next week, but I mean, if you're down, Chris, then we can. Um, but uh,
Yeah, I'm down. I can probably do one next week. I don't start class for another 2 weeks, so we can play it by ear though.
yeah, okay. Um, gonna have a lot to go through today.
Do we ever? So
Yeah,
much.
so much. I can't believe week 1's already in the books, and week 2 starts tomorrow.
It's crazy.
So glad football's back, though. I don't remember the last time my phone died from me having my screen on for 5 hours straight, basically refreshing. So
uh, as disappointing as this week was for me, I am still happy that fantasy is back, and I'm happy that football is back. And Sunday and this weekend was just phenomenal.
yeah, I completely agree. All right, so we'll kick things off real quick here. Have a quick question. Chris, who do you think? Who is your most surprising player this past week? And you can list, uh, any position, or you could just go through each position and say who you think.
All right, yeah. How about one from each position? I think my most surprising player at the quarterback position this week, I'm sorry, was Russell Wilson. I think a lot of people were expecting me to say Ryan Fitzpatrick because he had a phenomenal week, and really nobody expected that. But to be honest with you, my expectation for Russell Wilson was pretty down this week. With Doug Baldwin having the injuries that he's had, having the offensive line troubles that Wilson's had in the past. My expectations were not high. I know he's a great quarterback and that he can win games, very similar to the way Tom Brady or Drew Brees or Aaron Rodgers can do. But I didn't expect him to kind of go off the way he did, getting almost nearly 30 points this week. So hats off to him. I was not expecting it.
Yeah, I didn't get to watch much of that game, but losing Doug Baldwin earlier in the game, not really having anyone to throw to, he worked his magic and you know did what he does, regardless of how good his offensive line is and how much of a running game he's lacking. So, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna say Ryan Fitzpatrick was my most surprising player at the quarterback position. I know
Okay.
I know it's a divisional game and those can be messy, but you know, going back to last year, Saints defense was top 10 defense. Crawley and Lattimore,
Doubt.
two shutdown corners, and Ryan Fitzpatrick just had his way with them. So he's definitely my choice for the quarterback that no one expected to do well this week, and I don't think anyone expected the Bucks. Maybe I bet you even some Bucks fans didn't expect to go into New Orleans first week and do what they did to the Saints. So
A lot of experts had the Bucks going 0-4 at least to start the season. A lot of people had them out of the playoffs, and it looks like they might be able to contend in that division, one of the toughest in football, in my opinion.
oh yeah, I would say it's probably between NFC South and maybe the either AFC West or the NFC North. But it should be interesting to see how that plays out. And maybe Fitzpatrick takes over that role at quarterback when Jameis comes off his suspension if he's playing like that. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, you can go.
Um.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. We're still getting used to this, gentlemen. So bear with us here. Running back. My biggest surprise. Now, some of you may not agree with this, but it was Alvin Kamara. I know that he was a fantasy stud last year. He really was, one of those guys that just, catapulted you to the next level as a fantasy team. And I really didn't expect him to have the productivity and the efficiency coming out week one. I expected him to get some touches. I expected him to get some work and to use him. But this guy is a freak. This guy has means that are by far and away better than the top 0.1% in the world of athletes. Like the NFL is filled with the best athletes in the world, and he makes these guys look like they're running around in backyard recess, and he's just the fastest kid around. And you know what? Good for him. I'm fully on board with Alvin Kamara now. I really just think he is one of those football players that is going to go down as one of the best.
So You after seeing him all of last year, it only took 1 week for you to be convinced that he's the real deal this year.
Yeah, I really did because not only he's a running back, right? And running backs in a comeback situation like the Saints were this week, usually aren't considered much. Yeah, you'll have the passing down backs like Duke Johnson and stuff like that, but this guy can do both. He's just that much better of an athlete that they need to get the ball in his hands, however it is, handing it off, dump passes, passes down the seam. I mean, this guy, he can do it all, and I was down on him in the draft. I didn't draft him anywhere. I just thought he was going too high. I prefer volume, but he's one of those guys. So he was my surprise this week.
Yeah, he had a pretty good game. I think I came into this year pretty down on Kamara. Not necessarily down on him, but you know more of a I want to see him do it again to really be convinced. And um, I
Yeah,
think if he does well, maybe not this week because it's the Browns, but maybe next week or I guess the Bucks defense wasn't enough for me to be totally sold on him. So, but
okay.
obviously he was still had a very impressive performance. Um, over
Well,
a hundred. So,
who did you have for running back?
well, I think the obvious choice here, besides Kamara, would be James Conner. You think about his situation. Uh, you know, second year player. Didn't get to play that much last year. The only thing we have, to go on is what we saw in preseason, and he looked pretty good in preseason. Then he comes out in a rainy game against a divisional opponent, and he just lights it up. And you know, if I was Le'Veon Bell, I would not. I would if he wants to play this year, he's going to have to do something to, make the Steelers realize that he's worth it. I mean, he's still Le'Veon Bell, but James Conner proved last weekend that he can do everything that Bell can. Maybe not as well, but um, he's still a really good player, and he can fill that role if they need him to. Just
Yeah, he had a great week, and I know we'll probably talk about Bella a little later in the news here about which way we think things are leaning. But you're right. It was the Browns. However, from the moves that they've made offensively and defensively, I did expect them to be better than 0-16 this year. I think a lot of people do. Obviously, they are now with a tie. But he definitely showed that he can be a bell cow if needed. And you know what? There's no better team to plug and play a guy than into the Steelers offense for a bell cow type of guy. And he proved that he can do it. And I'd be worried if I was Bell as well.
yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's move along. Who? What about
Yeah.
wide receiver? Who do you think is the surprising player this week?
Well, I'm surprising. I had expectations for this guy to kind of rebound a little bit this year. I had no idea it would come in week one and come the way that it did. He had 11 targets. He had a new quarterback thrown to him. He caught 10 of those 11 targets for over 100 yards and a TD. And I don't think there's any way that they're not going to have to utilize this guy to be successful. And I'm obviously talking about Emmanuel Sanders, the Denver Broncos. Not the biggest guy in the world, but I really think he's a great route runner. I think Case Keenum trusts that he's going to catch the ball when he throws it to him. And, it was a big surprise to see it out there. Watching, the Broncos go from the past, they've always really been a running team. It looks like they were looking to pass the ball before run the ball this week. And I know it's only week one, but if that's going to be the case, I really do see Emmanuel Sanders being a consistent wide receiver 2 to wide receiver 1 every week.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys that I going into this season I really liked, and just off the basis that you see what Case Keenum did last year with Adam Thielen, and you have a athlete like Emmanuel Sanders who's just as good as Adam Thielen, if not better, and you put him into that slot role, and he could do just as well as Adam Thielen did last year. So I did not get Sanders in any drafts this year, but he is one guy that I was looking at, and I think I did not commit on him because I did get Royce Freeman. I didn't want to I didn't know how the Broncos were going to do, so I didn't think about getting him really. But yeah, um, really value player there, and I expect Demaryius Thomas to have a similar season. Um, but
A lot of arrows pointing up for the Denver Broncos right now. They're still trying to figure it out with Keenum there. I'm sure of it, but I do think things are going in the right direction, and there's going to be a lot of fantasy value there come the rest of the season.
definitely,
How,
definitely.
who is your wide receiver?
Well, for me, it was between Michael Thomas, after he, had a disgusting amount of targets and catches, but
Oh, that
uh,
was so sexy.
I would have to say, and not to say that we're surprised this guy broke out and did what he did this week, but Tyreek Hill against the Chargers, who have probably one of the best secondaries in the league, and
Definitely
he, you're talking about Kamara just making everyone look like they're slow or like it's flag football or something, but Tyreek, you've seen him do this so many times. But first touch of the game, punt return touchdown. He had two more touchdowns, and Pat Mahomes, he's obviously his go-to target. So um, I'm not saying that Tyreek is going to do this every week, obviously, but what we expect out of Tyreek every now and then, he just put up 40 points almost this past week. So uh, just a
crazy.
incredible athlete. He's so fast. He's not even that big of a guy. He's just so fast. Every time you see his highlights, he's just always behind the defenders and just gets to walk into the end zone. So he was definitely my surprise player of the week.
Yeah, he's an unbelievable talent. I know when he first broke out on the scene last year, I remember a stat that somebody had told me or I saw on Twitter or something like that, where the last time he had like run the 100 meters, I think was like a sophomore in high school, and it was the same year the Olympics were, and he would have come in 10th in the Olympics as a sophomore in high school, but he
That's
decided to go play football, which is unbelievable. Like people train their entire lives to run 100 meters in the Olympics, and this guy does it in high school as a sophomore and could be 10th in the world. Like that's disgusting.
yeah,
It's not fair for these corners,
that's pretty
safeties.
fast. That's probably like 10.5, somewhere around there probably. But yeah, that's
Yeah,
pretty
it's
fast.
right around there.
Okay, well, I think we have a consensus here on who the tight end was. But
Yeah,
before we get to
yeah.
him, I just want to say, uh, Lions defense and the Saints defense. Um, you know, we won't say that. Obviously, they're not players really, but they were obviously surprising. Everyone went into this game having higher expectations, and they just shit the bed basically. Lions did have a touchdown, which helped their case, but they got destroyed at home by Sam Darnold. So, um, yeah, you can't. You could talk about the Saints Bucks game all day. It's just a shootout, and every player went off basically. But okay, so I'll let you talk about our consensus tight end. Who was our best player?
On our notes here, we came up with the same guy, Jared Cook. I mean, the guy went off. I was watching that game on Sunday night. I stayed up probably later than I should have to watch it. But the guy is a head above NFL players. He goes off for 180 yards on what was it, 9 catches, I think.
Yep.
And every time they looked to, or Derek Carr looked to him, he was open. But he didn't even need to be open. The guy is so tall and so big that if Derek Carr throws it up to him, the chances are he's going to come down to it, come down with it. I have a fear though that this is going to be he has a reputation for going off 1 or 2 weeks in the season and then kind of hiding away. And for my sake, with Amari Cooper, I hope that's the case. But either way, he was a huge shock, and watching him, he was going to be a big part of his game plan
Yeah.
for the Raiders.
Yep. And that could be because the Rams have a revamped defense, even better than what they had last year. Their secondary is stronger, so maybe Derek just decided to throw it to him. But yeah, I agree with everything you said, and we're going to talk about Jared Cook in a little bit, I think. So, all right, let's move on to the news. We'll do this real quick. There's a few headlines that have come up over the past week. Obviously, the big one, Le'Veon Bell.
Hmm.
Hasn't shown up to practice. No one knows when he's gonna report. Obviously, we've heard rumors are week 10, but there's really no indicator of when he's coming back. And I don't know. What are your thoughts, Chris?
Well, let me ask you this. I just have one question regarding the whole Bell thing, right? I mean, we watched James Conner go off, and we also watched the Pittsburgh Steelers, future Super Bowl contenders, Pittsburgh Steelers, tie the Browns. Do you think that Bell is in a better position this week than he was last week, not reporting, or in a worse position? And I'd like to hear your answer.
I think it's a really good question actually because I didn't even think about that. Obviously there's the weather factor, there's the divisional factor, and I mean the Browns almost won that. Except for that blocked kick in overtime, they almost won that game. So
Hmm.
if if Bell is saying to himself, well, if I was out there, we definitely would have won that game, then he thinks he has leverage and, no reason to report. But if he looks at what Connor did and says, oh shit, then I guess it just depends on how he himself would see the situation. If I'm him, I'm waiting to see how Connor does maybe this week versus the Chiefs before I draw any conclusions. But it's just a messy situation, and I don't think anyone really knows what to think about it in terms of fantasy at least.
Yeah, it's super gray. I know Paul's going back and forth of tilting, not tilting, with as the Bell owner in our league. But my personal opinion is, I think Bell personally thinks that he is in a better position after that game, regardless of the stat line that James Conner put up. All right, I think it does go to a lot of credit to the offensive line, but I do think that if Bell was out there, things are different. I don't think that the Browns even come close to a chance. And statistic wise, people can argue me all day, but I really feel like the presence of Le'Veon Bell in the backfield really changes the way linebackers look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it opens more up for Antonio Brown. I really just don't think that. Adam, can you hear me?
Yeah, yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had a buzz in my ear. I really just don't think that the Browns were as scared as they would have been if Bell was in the backfield. So I think Bell's doing the right thing. I think that he's actually going to wait until the 10th week to report. Even then, I don't know if they're going to play him just to make a point. But I do think that he is playing with fresh legs. He's going to try to get a bigger paycheck, and this $8 million or whatever he's doing that he's missing out on this year, he'll get paid more over next year. But that's just my take.
Yeah, I mean he's definitely gonna get paid by somebody. Okay, well, going back to you mentioned Paul briefly, so I'm just gonna throw some names out there. If you had Le'Veon Bell right now, okay, and you were
Hmm.
freaking out about whether he was gonna return value this season, and someone offered you a trade, um, would you trade him for someone like Alex Collins?
I would keep Bell
Shady.
just because of how bad the Bills looked this past week. I would keep Bell as well.
Okay.
You know who I would trade him for is like a Devontae Freeman esque.
That was gonna
Some
be my next one. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I would pick Devontae over him right now. Absolutely.
It's a really risky situation, and I can see both sides of wanting to keep him because you paid so much capital to get him, but at the same time, kind of want immediate returns. So
Well, here's my last 2 cents on this thing. I really think if anything were to happen with Bell, that it should have been it needs to happen this week, or it needed to happen last week. If you have Bell and you wanted to get rid of him, you either make that decision last week or you make it this week and you just live with it and move on.
yeah,
I don't think that if you get to next week after what James Conner does this weekend, regardless, you cannot you have no value. Next week, it's either, okay, Lev is back to where he is, or it's the third week now. And the chances are he's not playing this year and you're not going to get anything for him. So That's my 2 cents.
Okay. The last question I'll ask you about this: if someone offered you James Conner for him, would you take it?
That's a roster dependent situation for me. I think if I have other reliable, not reliable by any means, not Lev Bell status running backs, but guys that are starting every week that I can count on 10 points for. Yeah, I think I do. I think I take the points now. I try to rack up a couple of wins with this extra stud. And then if Bell does come back, you know what? It is what it is. I got my 2 or 3 wins with this guy, and I move on.
I'm not sure what I would do, so I guess I won't comment on it because I'm really I if I were in that situation, it'd just be a pros and cons like essay basically in my mind. So okay, um, so okay, we'll get to the other points of news. There's some minor things here. Josh Allen starting for the Bills. Fire up your Kelvin Benjamins this week.
I He might be a flex. I mean, it's tough. It's tough. It depends on your roster again, but what's the ceiling for him, right? I'll ask you. What do you think Calvin Benjamin's ceiling is?
I'd give him 60 yards and a touchdown at best, and that's like if like pass interference downfield, and Allen can like fade him into the end zone kind of thing, and then he can get like I don't know 50 more yards randomly throughout the game. I think that's best case scenario.
I don't disagree with the line, but I do see I can I see Josh Allen picking a target as rookie quarterbacks often do, and whether that's going to be Calvin, whether that's going to be Charles Clay, I could see him targeting him double digit times. And you know what? That anytime, even if he catches one of them, God, I'd rather take 10 targets in my flex with the opportunity to go up to maybe 10, 15, 20 points all day. But that's my opinion. I'd rather take the targets over that random one catch, one touchdown kind of thing.
Yeah, no, yeah. If you're flexing him, it's a volume play. It's you expect him to get throwing the ball out and hoping that he comes down with a touchdown, basically. All
Yeah.
right. Okay.
So how about Martavis, man? He got signed by the Raiders. What do you think about that thing?
Well, I thought he was suspended, but apparently they're just anticipating a suspension, right? So,
Yeah.
uh, is this? I'm not sure if this is a. Wow, we did so bad last week, and Amari Cooper, had 3 targets, and if Jared Cook is our target monster, then we need some help, kind of thing, or I don't know.
It kind of feels like that. I mean, again, I can't speak for the organization of the Raiders, but it feels like they're kind of on tilt a little bit. They were going out with a game plan that they executed, I think, the first drive, maybe the second drive. But then they realized that they have nobody to throw the ball to other than Kalen Rashad, or I'm sorry, what's his? Yeah, not Doug Martin, the
Jalen,
other guy.
Jalen, or
Yeah, Jalen.
yeah,
Yeah, Jalen Rashad or Jared Cook, and then they look at these two guys and they're like, well, maybe we need somebody else because Amari Cooper clearly wasn't being looked at, or he was covered. He didn't look great on Sunday night, so I think they might be on edge a little bit, but to be frank, I don't think Martavis is going to see all of that much of the field. He's either going to get suspended or they're going to be like, wow, yeah, we should have just stuck with our gut and cut you in the first place.
yeah. I could see this turning into like a not to the same degree, but last year with the Chiefs and CJ Spiller, just constantly signing and re-signing someone. Um, Also, no love for Jordy. I think he had 3 targets, 23 yards. So he obviously was not a big impact there. So, um, okay. Greg Olson injured his same foot. He said he wants to play again this season, hopefully after a few weeks, and then just put the surgery off till after the season's over. I don't buy it. I don't see how you, if you have a 33-year-old tight end, who,
Hard drop, man. He's a hard drop. He
yeah,
was thinking about going to the booth last season. He gets hurt. I hate to see him get hurt. He was actually a great guy to watch play. I really enjoyed watching him play. He played the game right, in my opinion. but there's no way. There's no way. He's not going to be able to play the way he wants to play, even if he does come back in a couple of weeks. I think it's all over for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, I would agree. I even if he does do the surgery now, next year he's going to be 34. Well, if you hurt the foot again, at that point you probably should just retire. It's better. I think if he doesn't come back this season, he'll decide to retire in the off season. Um,
He's got to
and
compete with Jason Witten in the booth, man.
yeah,
Jason Witten took his job this year.
yeah, Jason, I actually watched some of that game, and he was pretty decent. So, um, but this is obviously negative for Cam Newton. Um, maybe it has positive effect for DJ Moore, obviously Christian McCaffrey, and then Devin Funchess as well. So, um,
No CJ Anderson in there?
uh, well,
It was a joke.
yeah.
It was a joke.
Cam took the goal line carries last week, so as he always
Yeah.
does. So, all right. Uh, really brief. Fournette and Devonta Freeman questionable this week after getting injured last week. Fournette had a hamstring injury. Devonta Freeman a knee injury, but both of them, from what I saw, plan on playing this weekend. So the TJ Eldon buy is more of a handcuff at this point.
Hmm.
And if obviously Fournette's not playing, or if Freeman's not playing, then you're gonna fire up your Colemans and your Yeldons. But if Freeman and Fournette are playing, would you risk flexing those two players?
Um, Tevin Coleman, I think, is always flexible in my opinion, whether Freeman's playing or not. I think actually I heard on another podcast that the statistics with Tevin Coleman and Freeman in the game actually both their numbers kind of go up. Um, so I do think that Tevin Coleman be worth a flex. TJ Yeldon, it's impossible to make that call right now. I really think there's way better flex positions. You're banking on an injury, and there's no way. Learning from mistakes, you can't just bank on injuries to try to win fantasy weeks. As likely as they may be, but what I will say is Fournette, I think, is forging himself a career now where he's earning this reputation of, hey, I'm a great running back when I'm in, but I might get hurt every single game. Kind of the way Shady was about a year and a half ago to 2 years, where he would get hurt, he would go to the sideline, but all of a sudden he would come back in, which is scary for fantasy owners. It's more of a risk, and that's just to me as a fantasy player, I avoid people like that. It's great to watch them go off, but it's so scary when I try to play someone and if they get hurt in the first quarter, you're done.
Yeah, and Fournette was one of those players. I was on you know, I didn't know what to think about him going into the season. I had him on my list as a guy I would pay for if I can get him at the right price. But if he didn't have the injury history, he would be. I feel like he'd be a top 5 back, and um, it's
No
really
doubt.
too bad. And I agree that you can't start Yeldon confidently if Fournette plays a little bit. But and they play the Pats this week, who did pretty well last week. So it it sucks for Fournette. He's a great player. He's fun to watch. But yeah, the injury history is just it's just there, and if he can stay healthy, that's great. But seems like a risky player to own at this moment.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't want to talk too much about this player because I could go on for the next hour and a half about how awesome he is and how that Sunday night game is probably one of the best games I've ever watched in my entire life. But Aaron Rodgers diagnosed with a knee sprain. He thinks he'll play. Mike McCarthy says they don't know for sure. He's day to day. I if they were playing someone other than the Vikings, I would probably say start, let him play. But it's going to be a hard game to win, and Vikings hurt him last year. If it's even somewhat risky, I say he should sit this week, which would obviously suck for Sam. What are your thoughts on
Well,
that?
it it's good for football when Aaron Rodgers plays. Period. He is a great player, and no one can really say otherwise. I would counter your point, though. I really think that because they're playing the Minnesota Vikings, Aaron Rodgers is going to play this week. I
Oh,
think Aaron Rodgers is a competitor. I think he wants revenge. I think he wants to go out there in a divisional game and he wants to win one for Green Bay, especially it being home. I don't see Aaron Rodgers missing this game unless he gets hurt in the game. And to be frank, I just don't see Mike McCarthy saying, Aaron, I'm sorry, you can't play this game. If he thinks he's ready to go and he wants to play, he's playing. And I think that's what's going to end up happening. For better or for worse, that's what I think is what's going to happen.
Yeah, and both sides of the argument definitely make sense to me.
Yeah.
But they did just spend 134 million on him, and to have him you know get injured potentially for the season in the second game of the year, you kind of gotta either go with your heart or play it safe. So I could see both ways happening. I hope he plays. If he can play, I hope he does. I would love to see the Vikings get shit on in Green Bay. And you know, did you watch the Sunday night game?
I watched the first half and then I went to bed
Oh
and
God.
I regret
Yeah,
it.
I was watching it and I felt like leaving or like turning it off after halftime. And I was like, oh, I'll give it one more quarter. He I saw he was coming back in the third quarter, and I was like shitting my pants, not knowing what to expect or if he's even able to stand up. But I I couldn't believe what I watched, and it's just another career moment for Aaron Rodgers. And if you haven't watched the highlights, I would definitely recommend going back and watching them.
Oh, I did. They were great. I think he needs a couple of things, finger jewelry, to really solidify himself as the best ever.
Yeah,
Um, he has the tools, he has the resume to be one of the best ever. But that argument's going to come where how many rings does he have? So I think this is a make or break season for him, and I think he's going to play this week. But
I hope so. All right, last player we want to talk about, Doug Baldwin, MCL sprain, out for at least 2 weeks probably. Um, you know, Short has
it's
him.
the other knee, though. It's the other knee,
Yeah,
not the one that he was nursing.
yep.
That's scary.
Yeah, I Doug Baldwin's in a weird spot where, if you bought him, if you can get something good for him, obviously, but you sell low. I don't know because you don't know how bad
Yeah,
it's gonna be, or
you're selling real low right now. I think that you saw his draft price just plummet when he said he was only 80%, and that was before the injury on the other knee. I feel like there's a way to you could probably buy him real cheap right now as just a flyer. But to be honest, I think 2 weeks from now we're going to see that this MCL is actually more of a pain than we thought. Watch Seattle go in and beat Denver this week. Now they're up 2-0. Maybe he can sit this one out, for a couple weeks, rest it up. I think people are going to start to drop him or even just stash him away, not even consider him as a start. So
yeah.
we'll see what Nick Short ends up doing with him.
I mean, if you figure, say he's out 4 weeks, and say he comes back week 6, and he says, "Well, I'm not fully healthy, but I can play." I think they have a bye week 7, so there's a chance they don't even let him play until after the bye. So week 8, do you play him, or do you just you sit on him, wait a week, see how he does? So you're not realistically starting him until week 9, and that's more than half of the regular season in fantasy. So you know, kind of you either gotta pray
Is
that
he worth the roster spot? That's the
exactly,
question, right?
exactly. And at the same time, though, I'm not really sure what you're hoping to get from someone if you're trying to shop him. So
Yeah, I
another
mean,
sticky situation.
Nick Short won this week. If he wins again this week, I don't see him dropping him. However, if he loses, and he maybe loses the next week, and he needs to start winning some games, he's going to have to start picking up players that, he can't just stash players. These are got to be guys that are going to go off for a week or two. So I think it'll depend on the record that Nick has. But right now, it's trending that I think he just stashes them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think um, he's panicking yet, but give him a few weeks. We'll see how he's doing. Okay.
Definitely.
Well, this is Wednesday, and we all know what happens on Wednesday, so we'll go over some of the top waiver wire pickups. And I know some of these were pretty spicy, but I'll let you start off. Who do you want to talk about first?
You know what? I was thinking we just kind of go in order here. Um, I will just say this: I set my alarm this morning for like 5:20 to go on and take a look at the free agents, and it hadn't gone through.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm just looking at the time now. 5:21 is when everything went through. I had obviously extremely upset with myself. Turned the alarm back on
Wait, are
because
you
I checked the
serious? You
settings.
actually set it for 5:20?
Yeah, I actually set it for
Oh
5:20.
my god.
I uh I actually checked the settings and it says like game time on Tuesday or whatever. I was like, wait, maybe they changed it this year. Maybe it'll be in the evening. I don't know. So I set the alarm back. I woke up later and then I realized, that it was 5:21 when actually everything went through, and I was a little upset with myself. But now
That
I know.
that's pretty funny actually. Well, the thing is, the other league that I'm in, I woke up around 3:30 randomly, and so I was like, "Oh, I'll check see if waivers went through yet." And they did in the my other league, which is also on Yahoo. So I stayed up for like the next 5 minutes refreshing my phone. Nothing happened. So I obviously kept waking up every 20 minutes checking until they did go through around 5:30. So uh, I don't know how they determine how why or when certain ones go through and other ones don't. But anyway, let's talk
well,
about who got who.
Yeah, so let's I'm just going to start at the top of the fab bids here. And the first one is Quincy Nunwa going to get shifty. Paul Teleska, who he is looking at a very, and I used this word with him earlier today, thin roster. He's got some studs in there, obviously with Julio and Kareem Hunt, but other than that, he's kind of piecing together a roster every week as of now until Bell gets back. And I think this was a great pickup for him. No, I saw two bids on there. I think it was Steve, who, we can talk about Steve in a little bit, actually. And then Sam both put $7 on him, which I think is fair. Anything from $7 to $10 is probably something that I'd be willing to put on him if I didn't have wide receivers that I was debating to start between anyway. But Quincy looks like the guy, and like we said earlier, or like I said earlier, Sam Darnold's a rookie quarterback. Rookie quarterbacks generally try to find someone that they trust. Quincy looked like the guy last night, and I'm sorry, 2 nights ago, Monday night, and for $16, I think it was kind of a steal. He overpaid quite a bit, but I think that was more than fair. I think he was anticipating someone just throwing a $15 bid in there, maybe Steve or someone like that. But hey, I think it was a good pickup, and I think he'll be a solid like third wide receiver for him for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I agree. At least if what we saw on Monday is what we'll typically see for the rest of the season, then yeah, I think one thing that made me question whether or not Quincy was worth a roster was one, it's his first start. They're not going to have Darnold throw deep very often. I know Robbie Anderson only had one target, but they're going to do those high percentage throws short, and in if this was PPR or half point PPR, he'd be a lot more valuable. But since it's standard, 60 yards is not. It's like a flex play, and you're hoping for a touchdown. But you go where the targets are. First week, and he's probably the most obvious waiver wire pickup of any of the
Yeah,
players that were out there.
and Paul needed something, and we can talk about that a little later.
Yeah,
But I think it was a good spot for Paul to pick this guy up. I was a little surprised that they didn't use Robbie Anderson more, but again, like you said, it makes sense that they're not going to throw the ball that deep. Robbie Anderson's a deep ball guy. He had one catch. It happened to go for a touchdown, and it was on more of like an inside crossing route than a deep shot. But
he was so open.
um,
He was
he
wide
was
open.
wide open. But then again, how bad, we don't know anything about the Lions other than that they sucked this first game. So we
Yep.
will see. We will see. Moving on. Chicago. We had two bids on that one.
Yeah. Bears going to Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers didn't do anything till the second half. But you look at the first few drives, Packers didn't do anything, and Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks, they were just causing so much disruption up front. Green Bay Packers, I would say, have a top 10 offensive line, and they were just manhandling them. Khalil Mack interception, fumble, sack, and a touchdown. If you had him in an IDP league, you were fucking ecstatic. He probably won your league.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
they had a top 15 defense overall last year without Khalil Mack, and they were one interception away from winning that game. Fucking stupid ass Kyle Fuller, thank God. But yeah, if they can do that at Lambeau, I think they are on the upward trend this year, and wouldn't be surprised to see them finish top 10.
Oh yeah, I actually think I have him slated top 10. And watching Khalil Mack and watching that game, at least the first half of it, which is why I put some money on it. I was like, oh, no one's going to be really looking for a defense other than the guy who had negative points for his defense. I'll throw a buck on this guy on Chicago D. Surprised they were on there, and Shorty's probably going to stash him. Who do they play this week?
They play the Seahawks on Monday night.
Okay.
I think it is
So
at
again,
Chicago.
yeah, I mean, this will be another one, right? They went into Lambeau and played the best quarterback in the league. Now they're going to play against Russell Wilson, another phenomenal quarterback that knows how to score and knows how to win games. So we'll see. We'll see. This could end up being a great pickup for Shorty at $4. So good for him.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
All right. Austin Eckler was picked up by Ray for $3. This is kind of like a James White pickup by Ray, where he's gonna see some touches in the passing game, and obviously he's a handcuff for Melvin Gordon if he gets hurt. But just I guess a solid roster spot. I was thinking about picking him up, but that was only if George Kittle didn't go through. But only because I figured, hey, I might as well handcuff him. But I'm not really too worried about Melvin. And as I said, that pray to God he doesn't get hurt this week. But Eckler does have standalone value. I think he's in between like a Tevin Coleman and like Dion Lewis probably. Although I think those two are pretty similar in value as well. But
really, I have him a little lower than that. I really do think Melvin is like a 3-down back. I think Austin's kind of a change of pace. They're going to bring him in here and there. And I mean, the Chargers played a pretty good team, and they needed to change it up a little bit against Andy Reid in Kansas City. So I think there is value there, but again, with the zero running back strategy Ray has strategically done this year, I think him picking Austin up is kind of it's more of like a screw you, Adam. I'm gonna take your handcuff and really hope that your guy gets hurt, and then I'm gonna be Mr. Handcuff, Mr. Great Wide Receivers, and try to win this thing.
on
Which hey is a strategy, but again, like I said earlier, I'm trying not to bank on injuries this year, which is it's sometimes tough to do.
yeah, I mean that's Ray's forte this year, right? Like James Conner, Corey Clement, Austin Eckler now. Lots of handcuffs on that team. I think he has another one, but I can't remember. Oh, he had John Kelly too. So.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. But I take back what I said. Austin Eckler is not anywhere near Dion Lewis or Tevin Coleman, but he does have standalone value. If you had to, you could plug him in and flex any given week and probably get enough value out of him where you're not disappointed with him.
Yeah, in a PPR or half point PPR, I think it would be tough. I think there's a lot better options in a standard league like ours to flex him in a 10 team at least.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I don't want to talk about this guy really because I don't like him, and he's ruining the Royce Freeman hype train. But Philip Lindsay, awarded to Paul for $11. Ray bid on him for $7. Lindsay had the exact same rushing line as Royce Freeman, 15 carries, 71 yards, and he had 2 catches for 30-something yards, I think, and a touchdown. If you go back and watch the film, Lindsay was mainly on third down, If you look at, you can say, oh, he had 15 carries though, but he was definitely the change of pace back. He was in on plays where I would say the Seahawks expected them to pass, um, and Royce Freeman was out there on the running plays. And like I said, if you watch the film, I think I might be a little biased, but Royce Freeman looks like the overall better back, stronger, faster, able to push the pile. But Lindsey has some value, obviously from what we saw. But even if I didn't have Royce Freeman, I would be hesitant to bid on this guy just because, who was the guy? Oh, I think it was our senior year, or it was your junior year of college. The last name was Ogletree. I remember I God,
Yeah, Alec Ogletree,
yeah, he
and
fucking
Jake
went
picked him
off.
up for freaking $99 after the first week.
Yeah, it's just players can go off any given week. Last year, Kenny Galladay went off one of the first weeks, and he was like, everyone was like, oh shit, this guy, he's the new, like,
Megatron.
yeah, and then he didn't really do anything the rest of the season. So, obviously, if he passes the eye test, he's worth a roster spot. But I think there's too much going on in that backfield, and I think Royce Freeman is still the guy to own. But
Yeah, I agree with all of your takes there. With regards to Philip, with regrets or with context to our league, I think that again this kind of shows some of the holes that Paul might have in his roster right now that he's trying to fill. And I think $11 is a little much for a third down running back. But hey, what do we know? This is week one. We could very well see Phillips start to take more and more share. I'm with you in the fact that Royce Freeman, and I think, is a better back physically. He has the talent. He has the tools to be that bell cow type of guy. But again, he showed promise this first week. They have a new quarterback. I mean, Latavius Murray last year with Case Keenum had value even when Dalvin Cook was there. So I do think that it's worth a roster spot. $11, not up my alley. I'm going to wait for potentially a major injury and try to get the handcuff if Ray doesn't have him. But yeah, I think this kind of just shows a little uncertainty in Paul's roster right now. And lastly, I will just point out that the two guys that Paul was really going for were just $1 above an increment of 5. So if you ever think Paul's going to go for someone, he's probably just going to bid $1 more than the closest 5 spot until he hears this.
yeah.
So
uh, all right. Would you rather have Lindsey or Austin Eckler?
Austin Eckler,
Really?
I would.
Even
I
though,
really, really like the Chargers this year. I know that we talked highly about the Denver Broncos earlier. I really think that between Freeman, Booker, and Lindsey, that's going to be kind of a play the hot hand type of committee back there. And at least Austin Eckler, I know what I'm getting. Pass catching, third down back, who's going to probably get 5 to 7 targets a game. Small little targets, and he'll be able to make what he can out of those targets. So I'd rather take the consistency over the wheel of fortune of Denver running backs.
I I would probably disagree, but I think they're very close, and I would not be disappointed with having either as a stash, but not necessarily as a starter.
Definitely, yeah. No one's playing these guys right now except maybe Paul.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So last major one that we'll talk about is my acquisition of George Kittle, and I will say I was back and forth on whether or not I wanted George Kittle or Jared Cook these past few days. After seeing what Jared Cook did Monday night, I was like, damn. Well, if he's gonna be Derek Carr's go-to, then maybe I should pick him up. I mean, the waiver wire for tight ends is so thin that I know.
Tight ends suck.
Yeah,
Just
they
in
do.
general, tight ends suck. I hate tight ends. I
But
love Gronkowski, and having Gronk is amazing in a lot of my other leagues. But like tight ends are just shooting, random shotgun approach that maybe one of your pellets will hit.
Yeah, no, but it's an important position, I would say, and the fact that there are tiers of tight ends, makes it somewhat predictable. And George Kittle looked great on Sunday, and
He really did. I have to agree with you here. I've heard of a lot more money being spent over a couple of different podcasts on George Kittle. I think even up to $40+ in some leagues, just because they think, this guy, he ran good routes, and Jimmy G is going to need a guy, especially with Greatwin going down, that he's going to need a guy to lean on, and Jimmy's not a guy to just hand the ball off and let the team take over. He's going to want to throw the ball. He was under Belichick, and he likes these little short passes. Use the tight end, like he learned for so many years in New England. So I think it was a really good pickup by you, and I'm a little jealous.
Yeah, I have good expectations for him. But I did like him, and I was going to bid on him either way, but I think the fact that I knew Paul was going to need a tight end after Delaney Walker goes down, it was between Cook and Kittle, and I decided Kittle was better, I think, more reliable, so I put my money on him. Because I remember last year, I had Jared Cook in one league, and he would have a 100-yard game, and then he'd have like a 9-yard game. And that's tight ends in general, maybe, but for him,
Right.
it was like night and day. It was either he got all the targets from Derek Carr, or he didn't even get looked at. So, I'm hoping.
Let me ask you this then, a question, because obviously Paul picked up Jared Cook for $0 on the waiver this morning. Would you have rather picked up and
Kittle.
saved your $22?
No,
You
Kittle.
want okay?
Kittle
There
for
it is.
sure.
All right.
Yeah, I was thinking about this last night. I was like, oh shit, did I bid too much before I went to bed? And I would rather spend the money and regret it later than not spend enough money and not get a good enough player, like not get a great player and then regret it, like really regret it later. So I think that, and especially with Fab, you gotta spend, if you're gonna spend it eventually, spend it on who you think is worth it. So
Absolutely. I do think 22 is good. And just a note that Paul spent $2 over the 5 increment this time. So I'm not quite sure a strategy there.
yeah, my first bid was on $18 for him, and I would have looked like a fucking genius if I left it that. But I was like, Paul's gonna bid up around $20 on this guy, so I'm gonna bid 22, assuming that he goes $1 over 20. So
look at that, Paul. We have your strategy.
Yeah.
I know we talked about Jared Cook a lot. I just wanted to make a note that I can't believe he had 180 yards, and not one person in a tight end thin league right now even spend $1 on him.
Yeah.
He gets no respect, man. No respect.
Oh, the Rams defense, you figure, you don't know. Everyone's kind of high on Amari Cooper going into this year because you're like, is he gonna be good again? Maybe not. We're not sure. And I think, I don't know. It's if anyone started Jared Cook, you probably would have been told you're an idiot. So
Yep.
I don't blame anyone for not starting him, but yeah, 12 targets, 9 catches, 180. It's pretty insane.
And just before we move on to the matchup recaps, which we are going to go to, I know that we're running long on this, at least for an hour podcast goes. But is Steve a fantasy prophet this year? I think he just picked up Chris Godwin, which I think is phenomenal. And he's actually making bids this year. Is Steve playing fantasy? Is this a guy that we're going to need to worry about? Come.
I was actually thinking this a few days ago because he picked up TJ Yeldon, and people were like, "Wait, why would you're gonna handcuff Fournette?" Like, okay, that kind of makes sense, but like that's if you're anticipating him getting hurt. He gets hurt. Steve already has Yeldon. He held on to Martavis Bryant for a little bit for whatever reason, and we're like,
yeah, it was dumb. But besides that was tech classic Steve.
Yeah,
now he picks up Chris Godwin, which will be pretty good. And
Deshaun Jackson's hurt, so
yeah, he has D-Jax. I don't know if he just this was like year of 2014 when, these are just the names that he remembers because he didn't do any research, or he just knows a lot more and hey, he was prepared.
I would guess it's probably the luck, but yeah. Uh, okay,
I
so
would I would be on that too.
let's go through the matchups. Let's try to go through them like kind of quick, just because we are at around 53, 54 minutes. And just kind of talk about the highs and lows of the matchups, and we'll start with yours and Steve's, which has more lows than highs, but I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah, so I lost 109 to 62, close to 63. I'm gonna round up there. But Steve actually only outscored me in 4 spots on the roster this week. He crushed me in QB. Derek Carr threw 100 yards or 300 yards against the Rams, which I was okay with. But he had no touchdowns and he had a couple interceptions. I know it was kind of a risky start, but I really thought Amari Cooper was going to be more involved, and he wasn't. Then he absolutely smashed me in running back. Obviously, he had Kareem. I'm not Kareem. I'm sorry. He had Alvin Kamara, Super Kamario, and he did his thing. And then obviously the defense. I mean, he had a pretty normal week for defense. 18 points is a good week, I would say, actually. But the fact that he outscored me by 26 points in that position just because of how bad the Saints did really did put me behind the 8 ball.
Yeah.
So it was a rough week for me. I gave Steve a win, frankly, and I'm not really sweating it too much. Everyone's going to have losses or bad losses. Actually, I'm tied with 4 other people in the league right now with the same record. So I'm not sweating it too much. I will look to rebound this week, but otherwise, if I get a couple more losses here in the first 5 weeks, I might look to make some changes to avoid beer model contention. So
Yeah, and
moving on.
yeah, well, I just
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
just a quick comment. You look at Steve's lineup, and a lot of his players did almost nothing. You look at the big scoring players, and if you're gonna expect that out of him every week, he only put up 100 points or whatever. So that's that's not even that good. But so once those players come back down to earth and settle over, around their average, which is probably half of what they did this week. Well, at least for Kamara, the other ones are probably
Yeah,
around average. But I would not expect him to put up over 100 that often this year.
I
Um.
would agree with that.
Okay.
Next up,
Yep.
Paul T and Nick Shirt.
Yeah.
Paul lost to Nick 100 to 98 in the closest matchup of the week. What are your thoughts?
Well, going into Monday night, I went to a bar with Nick Short, and as he walked into the bar, the Detroit defense got a pick six, and he's like, "That is literally the worst thing that could have happened to me right now." And so, from that angle, it looked like it was gonna be a long night for Nick, and Paul was gonna get the easy win. But then Matt Stafford shit the bed. Detroit defense also did not do well, but a lot of the points that they scored, or some of the points they scored were not the defense or special teams fault. So, um, yeah, Paul's not gonna, unless once Bell comes back, if Will Fuller returns to form what he did last year, which we'll see. This is probably around what we should expect out of Paul's team, right around that 100, 110 point per week, at least until Bell comes back. And I would not expect 130, 140 points out of Paul unless Kareem, does what he did, 6 weeks out of last year. And as for Nick Short got this win without Doug Baldwin. Doug Baldwin did zero anything. He got
Goose
hurt.
egg.
Yeah, he got hurt too early, and Derrick Henry kind of sucked. He's probably not worth. He's kind of risky to start. At least I won't say he's not worth starting, but he's definitely a risky start now. And Chris Hogan also did not do that well. So, which I would not expect that to continue. But
Right.
Short. This is probably a low week for Short. I would say for sure. So,
Yeah, I had the same notes. I think Paul's team did what he basically should have expected from it, with the one exception being Kareem Hunt. Obviously, I think he was probably expecting a little bit more than what Kareem gave him. Nick Short on the other side, he obviously had a roller coaster there with a poor quarterback outing. Obviously, goose egg from his flex, and with that said, he still scored 100 points, and he has a team that I think is set up to avoid some of those 60-point weeks. So, will he boom all the time? I don't think so. I think it's set up to kind of have some of those. All right, this player sucked this week, but this guy's going to pick him up, and we're going to be around 110 to 120 every week
Yeah, for sure. And
with high upside.
yeah, definitely. And I think you just look at the players, unless something major happens, that's just what we should expect. So
Yeah.
okay.
All right. So you played Sam next. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, so going into Sunday night, I was nervous for good reason. With all the Green Bay players that Sam had, I'm not gonna say that I was excited that Aaron Rodgers got hurt because God, I was really almost like I was really upset because I thought the season was over right there. But it looked like I was like, okay, well, if that's gonna happen, then I guess I beat Sam this week, whatever. But Sam's team did really well. I think he put up like around 140. Joe Mixon had 20 points. Pretty much every person on Sam's team except for Jimmy Graham did something, but that's okay because Jimmy Graham's points basically went to Devontae Adams. So that's why you start both players, assuming one of them is going to score the touchdown. Yeah, I think Sam's team is going to be good this year if Rodgers is healthy. I don't think he'll score 140 many times. I think week one is always a little inflated, but I would expect Sam to score probably between 110, 120 week in, week out if things go as planned, obviously. And as for my team, they did pretty much everything I expected of them. I think Kenyon Drake might have done better if the game didn't get delayed for 4 hours or whatever. I think Royce Freeman, I should expect more out of him as the season goes on, but pretty much everyone else did what I expected them. Larry Fitzgerald, 7 catches for 80 yards. That's about what I want out of him with touchdown upside. And then my wide receiver 3 is really just a hold right now until Julian Edelman gets back. So, and Melvin Gordon didn't score, but he still put up 18 points. So,
yeah, I mean, Michael Thomas, Melvin Gordon, the two guys that you really paid for, and then the Jacksonville defense obviously brought home, the majority of your points there. I really think that it's exactly who you expected to score the points. You talked a little bit about Kenyon, Rudolph. Obviously, we talked about tight ends. I think those are two big question marks that you got going forward. Your running back 2 and your tight end. I mean, Rudolph has always been a pretty decent play, but he is getting older. Different quarterback this year, one that has targeted the tight end, but he had a freak tight end. So, and Rudolph, I don't think is a freak athlete by any means like Jordan Reed.
what about George Kittle?
That's tough. I think George Kittle is going to be uh, more subject to the way that the San Francisco 49ers are going to play. I think Jimmy GQ, he really learned a lot from Brady, and Brady threw a lot to the tight end because he had a good one. So that's a good question. I don't think I have a great answer for that one actually, as I stutter through that answer.
Yeah, and I know I'll just touch on Kenyon Drake real quick because I basically have to be a super big supporter of him this year. He played 74% of the snaps this past weekend for the Dolphins compared to Frank Gore's 29%, I think it was, which only is like that because they were on the field at the same time a few times.
Mm-hmm.
But he was the guy on the field most time. Gore did well with his
Yeah.
snaps, but Kenyon Drake got a majority of them, so I guess I have that to look forward to.
Hey, you got to be an optimist in that situation.
Yeah,
Sometimes you're going to get it, and sometimes you're not. It is tough being in a timeshare though.
yeah,
But hopefully, they realize that Kenyon is the better player there, which, in my opinion, he is. At least at this point in Frank Gore's career.
yep, for sure. Okay, this was probably the matchup of the week.
Definitely.
With Jake and PK, I feel like I checked this matchup every 5 minutes, and I was like, "Oh, they're winning now," and it just went back and forth. And And once I saw Tyreek score 40, I was like, oh, Jake's got this. And then uh, it was just, you know, a really good matchup. A lot of high scoring. Drew Brees went off for PK. Mike Evans did really well against the Saints, and obviously Jake had Gurley. Those are like the notable players I'm thinking of. Oh yeah, and PK started Adrian Peterson, who looked great this past weekend.
Yeah, he really did. I mean, it was a tough loss for Jake. It really could have gone either way. It's even more tough for Jake when he sees Tyreek the Freak put up 40 points essentially, and he still loses. But I made a note in our log notes here that Drew Brees on a comeback effort is basically the fantasy dream. I mean, the guy has a reputation for just racking up fantasy points. And then when he has to throw the ball and they know they're going to throw the ball, I mean, Drew Brees really took PK over the edge on this one. I mean, he can't expect that every week from him. I think it was kind of all the stars aligned for Paul Cripple this week. I don't expect 150 points coming from him at all this season again. So it was a good win, and it might get him into the playoffs with that one extra win. So overall, it was a great matchup to watch.
yeah, it definitely was, and I don't know. I think that is a very good chance. There's a very good chance that that's the most points PK will score this year, but you never know with players like Mike Evans, where they had a down year last year, and then this year maybe they bounce back and go off back to their top 5 form like he did a few years ago. There's room for him to score points, but there's definitely like a question whether or not they'll be that good again.
Yeah, for sure. So the last one we got here, just to continue to move it on forward, we had Wallet versus Ray. Chit chatty Ray Bailey, talking all sorts of shit preseason, comes out and gets his first loss in the first week of the season. What do you think?
Well, he did put up 110 points almost. He did have Marquise Goodwin, uh, get hurt and not do anything. So I won't fault him there. But Odell had 111 yards, I think. Nuck
Hmm.
had around 60 or 70 yards. Neither of them scored a touchdown, so they didn't even really hit their ceiling. So there's obviously room for improvement there in terms of points. James Conner and I think Ray's team is good for now. I think his running backs are good enough to where they just need to do good enough, like their average of 10 points ish, and he'll be able to get carried by the other positions that he has. And plus, Travis Kelsey also scored zero point 0.6 points with his one catch. So there's a lot of room of improvement. I would say this is probably uh, lower than his average will be. I think he's probably hovering around the 115 to 120 on an average week. And there's no way that sure Wallet dropped 163 in the first week, but there's no way he does that again this year. There's absolutely no way. And
Four players over 20 points and two over 30. Are you like, come on?
yeah, and
That's
like that's the Baltimore defense did great. The Jets defense actually scored more than the Baltimore defense, but then you have JJ putting up 20 on his 2 touchdowns with a 60-yard night or whatever, and
yep,
then Isaiah Crowell with his 60-yard touchdown run. Um,
two touchdowns.
yeah, I know it's crazy, and I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, he had Antonio Brown too. So yeah, just a
So I'll
good
just
week
say
by Wallet, but I wouldn't expect it again.
So I'll say this. I mean, uh, you very well could be right with Ray's average score going up. I will say this though: the way Ray has his team structured is that he's expecting good weeks out of those core players. That maybe he all of them this week really didn't have good weeks. His running backs kind of carried him this week, and I don't think his team is set up to have his running backs carry him. So the way I see it is okay. Odell Beckham probably had an average week, maybe a little less than average week. Nuke had an under average week. Kelsey, you can definitely say had under average week. But I think his running backs, both of them, the core of his team, or the core to any team really, was they were over that his average that I think you're going to see this year for his running back scores. So it'll be very interesting because if he's going to win games, it's got to be now when James Conner is, being James Conner,
That
and
is
it's
a
tough
good
to see
point.
him go over. Not that it was his fault he went up against the highest scoring guy in the league, but it's tough to see that strategy lose when you get what you want out of these zero running backs, and then the rest of your team lets you down.
That's true. And with bye weeks, and say Bell comes back, Ray's team takes a huge hit. So I agree, and but I think if the weeks that his players play, he can expect to get in that 110 to 115 range if players form how he expects. So
I would agree with that. So I had a note here at the end. I think we're running out of time to talk about it, but it was really about how defenses have such high scoring. I think of all the leagues that I play in, the defenses in this league have the highest scoring potential in all the leagues. I don't know if it was standard or if we had made adjustments. I haven't been diligent enough to really research that, but I probably will. In my opinion, seeing 30 plus points out of defenses, whether it's Baltimore or the Jets, really swings a matchup, especially, when we spend $1 or $2 or even up to $4 or $5 in the draft on a defense. It's not really the main focus. So my question to you is, do you really think defenses should be able to score up to 30 points and win weeks for people?
I think they do. I think the one thing that I might disagree with Paul, because he did change the scoring a little bit from standard, is that the points for tackles for loss, the half point, I think that is a good idea, and I wouldn't necessarily change it, but that does inflate the scoring a lot because Baltimore defense had 10 tackles for losses, and that includes sacks. So sacks you get 1.5 points for.
Oh,
Yeah, and you know a defense like Baltimore's or the Jets this past weekend, that did have such great performances, I'm okay with having them put up 30, 32.
mm-hmm.
But it's kind of it's hard to change them. I think where it's either they're really good or then they're insignificant. And I think another thing that Paul added to the scoring that's different is also fourth down stops count as a turnover, so you get 2 points for that. So me against Sam this week, going to that last play that the Chicago Bears had, it was a sack, it was a forced fumble recovery, it was a fourth down stop, it was a tackle for loss. He got like 5 points from that. Um,
Yeah.
if I think it's more actually. Yeah, it's actually more. It's like 5.5, 6. So that's where those extra points come from. But one thing I will say though, if you look at the top 5 defenses from this past weekend, so that is New York Jets, Baltimore defense, Jacksonville, Minnesota, and the Rams. I'm just gonna go through some stats here. Okay, Baltimore
Mm-hmm.
6 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, no touchdowns. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Jets 11 points against, 3 tackles for loss, 5 interceptions, and 1 touchdown. Jacksonville, um, 8 tackles for losses, 2 sacks, 1 interception, 1 touchdown, 1 fumble recovery. Minnesota, 3 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions, 1 touchdown. Like these are defenses that are earning their points. So
Absolutely.
it seems like a lot of points, but I think that might also just be because week one is very um, there's a lot of parity in week one, and so I would expect some defenses to perform worse, a lot worse than they will the rest of the season, and then also some that perform way better than they will the rest of the season. So Sorry about that.
Well,
But
so at risk of prolonging this more than it needs to,
yeah,
I will just ask it. What if I asked it differently? So maybe if I didn't put it on the high end, but what if we look at the low end, right? Let's take two of the worst defenses this week in the New Orleans Saints and Detroit. Do you know the point difference between those two?
um,
20 points. Detroit scored 12 points despite giving up 42 points. New Orleans scored -8.
that is true.
It is, I'm not saying that Detroit didn't earn 12 points, but, that is a tough, regardless of what it is, and we can move on. We can write proposals or I can write a proposal or whatever. But, you see two defenses that really just got destroyed in these tackle for losses or fourth down stops sometimes, just depending on game flow. May or break, up to 10, 20 points, double digit points. So,
Yeah, and I think the one thing I would argue against would be to get rid of the tackles for losses and maybe even the fourth down stops, or at least nerf the fourth down steps to 1 point, and then just get rid of the tackles for loss. Because if a winning team is kneeling the ball at the end of the game, that's a tackle for loss. It counts as a tackle for loss. So
yeah.
that's just that's inflating points. So, but okay,
Week
that
two, what do you
yeah.
got?
Well, tomorrow, Bengals Ravens original game should be good. I'm not. I don't have anybody in that game. I think I might
I've
have
got
someone
AJ.
in FanDuel, but I'm not sure. But other than that, I'm not too invested in the game. Should be good though. I'd bet on the Ravens. I think it'll be a defensive battle. I don't see a lot of points being scored. Maybe 40, maybe, but I'd probably give the edge to the Ravens, even if it's away. I'm not sure where it is.
Yeah, I think it's at the Bengals actually. And I wouldn't bet this game, period, because I don't know anything about the Ravens. That's how bad the Bills were. I want the Bengals to win. I'm kind of a closet Bengals fan. Um, and I really want AJ to do well. I think it's going to be a tough matchup, and I would be lying if I have considered sitting him this week, but I know I can't do that. Just you got to play your studs.
Yeah, for sure.
So
And Jimmy Smith is still not playing, who is their best corner. So that definitely, and they are gonna play better than the Bills probably.
yeah. All right. So who's your most interesting matchup for this week?
This coming week, I would probably have to give it to it's either Steve and Sam, mainly because I want to see how Steve's team does this week, and plus if Aaron Rodgers does not play, I want to see how Sam's team does. Um, but probably Wallet and PK. They both had really high scoring weeks last week. I want to see if both of them are probably going to regress a little bit. Almost absolutely. So I want
Mm-hmm.
to see if what an average week out of each of them would look like, and I would probably give the edge to PK in this matchup. What about you?
Yeah, I That's an interesting matchup. I think both of them definitely, had really good weeks. I do think I would give the edge to, you know what? I would give the edge to Paul Kreppel just because he has David Johnson, and I don't know why. I got a gut feeling that David Johnson's going to have a pretty good week this week.
Even
So yeah,
against
I'll
the
give him my.
Rams at LA.
I think DJ is going to have one of those, you can't stop him kind of nights. I don't think the Rams are going to lose, but I think DJ is going to eat.
Gotcha. All right. What do you think is the most
My
interesting?
my my interesting matchup of the week this week is definitely going to be Short versus Ray. I think Short in a lot of ways kind of came up a little punny short last week, even though he did get the victory in his lineup, especially optimally. And I think Ray will see a lot more production out of where he expected the production and a lot less out of his running backs. And I kind of want to see where that lines up. Is hopefully we get two true scores of where these guys kind of organize their teams and where it comes. And I want to know who's really going to be the better one
Would you uh would you say that last week Short's team pissed the bed?
there.
Okay. Well, I think out of all the matchups we have this week, I'd probably give biggest blowout probably to no offense, probably between you and Jake. I've like I said in last podcast, I really like Jake's team, and I'm not sure how well your team is going to do, and not just looking at the projection, but I just think he has a way better overall team, and I don't think it'll be a huge blowout, not like Wallet versus Ray, but I think the difference will be there to earn it.
My biggest blowout's definitely going to be Steve. I think that in a divisional matchup, Aaron Rodgers going. It's home against the Vikings, right? Where they're going. Yeah, it's home against the Vikings. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to step up to the plate, and I think every time he does that, Sam's going to win. And I think Steve's team definitely regresses this week, back to less than 100.
Yeah, I can see that, but God, I would love it if Steve beat Sam. That would be hilarious.
Oh my God, that would be great. Watch Steve start 2-0.
Steve being the only team to start 2-0. Actually, no, that can't happen because
Can't
PK and
happen.
Wallet play each other.
Yeah, Short could start 2-0 too if
Yeah,
he beats Ray.
that's well. I meant like there's no guarantee though. Like there's no PK and Wallet are the only 1-0 teams facing each other, other than Sam and Steve. That where there's gonna be a 2-0 team at the end of this week. So there's
Yeah.
okay.
All right. So before we leave, because we're done here, what does your freaking team mean, Adam?
So
What does your team
okay,
mean?
so if you've watched Always Sunny, it's the 2 episode series, I guess if you want to call it, where they go to their high school reunion, and they're like
Oh, I have seen that one.
yeah, they're pre-gaming in the parking lot, and they say that they're the Gross Crew. So that's
Were you watching Always Sunny?
I was watching it, and those 2 episodes are fucking hilarious because at the end of the second episode they're singing Freedom, and they're just like it shows them how they think they sound, and then they're like super drunk and it just sounds like gibberish. It's so fucking funny. So
Okay. Well, thanks for the clarity, man. This was, as always, awesome.
yeah, and like we said in the last one, this is probably gonna be, I think once the season starts coming around, gonna be a every other week kind of thing where I don't know if we'll go over matchups for like the previous matchups because there'd be way too much to talk about.
Yeah.
And I didn't actually think this one was going to be this long either, but yeah, just I guess in general, especially if someone else joins us, it would take way too long. But
Well, another option is that we could record one, and then we could probably try to break it up into 2 pieces,
that's true. We could do that too.
and kind of give them a little bit more. But thanks again, man, for setting this up, and always a pleasure. And I'm gonna get my first win this week.
Yeah, I hope I do too. I'm really hoping to beat Paul and put him on even harder tilt. Maybe he'll sell me Bell for like with Julian Edelman.
Yeah, do it.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, guys. If you have any suggestions or anything, let us know in the group me. But we'll talk to you later.
Ray, you suck. Ha.